so New Year's morning, nobody picked up the phone. The only person who did was this guy that I did all drugs and alcohol drank with. And I said, hey, if you come to my house, get me 10 bacon, egg, and cheese sandwiches, pick up my medicine from CVS, I'll give you all the drugs and alcohol at my apartment. And he's like, I'll be there in 5 minutes. Right. And he was there. And then he was true to his word. He did it. He picked up everything. And then he took out a bag, like a trash bag, he like, rang it out. And he's like, okay. And he went on a drug hunt, and during the time that he went to go to get the medicine and the bagels, I thought he's gonna try to look for it. So I tried to hide things. And he was on a ladder. He's like, wow, you did a good job trying to hide all this stuff. And I remember looking at him as he left my place, and he had everything.
And we are here with Josh. Josh, my neighbor, my friend, the first person to really give me a good hug after I lost my dog. And he's also running for Congress. And hi, Josh.
Hi, Stephanie. Yeah, I remember where we were. We were at Trader Joe's having like a real emotional moment because I was really moved, and we were both of us just crying at Trader Joe's, hugging each other in the middle of like right next to the bananas and the zucchini.
Yes, that's exactly where we were.
Yes.
Well, because
No,
when I
I'm so
had,
happy to be here.
well, you have a dog. Well, we've had parallel dog journeys because you
That's
had your
right.
last dog before this dog, before Gus. You had
Yes.
Louis for many, many years, and as he declined, you all just totally off the topic of sobriety, but like that was
Yeah.
hard when you were like, today's Louis's last day, and do you want to say bye? And then so I knew who to come to when my dog, who
Mm,
passed in November, was dwindling. And I asked you
yeah.
what you anyway, so we were bonded.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I could because Louis, my first dog, he lived to be 14, and it does connect to sobriety, but he sort of lived out the end of his life in this neighborhood, and one of the dogs that he really liked was your dog Peepaw, and they both shared this nice sort of calmer older dog, just personality. They were both they had, and Louis, it was so tough. He was my soul dog. He was 14 when he passed, and when he did, I remember telling him at the time, I just said that I was not strong enough to let him go on my own and that he had to tell me. And then that night, all night long, he was just pawing at my feet all night. And I knew that it was time. So we ordered from Petit Trois a Big Mac, like a $50 hamburger, which was his favorite. He would often, when we would order food, he would always find a way to get the Big Mac. And we called this company, and they used this, I don't know, they couldn't have known, but this amazing purple blanket. And Louis was named for Louis the 14th, Louis Quatorze, the Sun King. And he was laying out in the sun. He had just eaten his Big Mac on this royal purple blanket. And it was just this amazing, peaceful moment. And he looked like the Sun King, in his last moment. And yeah, I remember when you told me, um, it's so tough to lose a dog because they're a part of our lives. When I first got sober, the Louis he was the only thing that I had in my life. I got sober in the beginning of 2019 on January 1st because I like to do things, ruin holidays for my family, right? So I got like I had a DUI, which was a long time ago, which was about over 10 years ago on Thanksgiving weekend. So I called my mom, as you do, from jail on the Sunday of Thanksgiving. And it was my niece's first Thanksgiving. And so my mother was just celebrating, Thanksgiving with her first granddaughter. And then there I was. You have a collect call from Culver City Jail, right? And then again on January 1st, 2019, this time it wasn't a collect call, it was my cell phone, 7 a.m. from LA. the hospital room, broken ankle, broken leg to my mom. Um, and she said, "Yeah, okay, well, I guess your dad is going to fly out there and help you." And I got back to my house, and I see Louis at the door, and I'm on crutches, and I thought, how am I going to walk this dog? But the thing about Louis was that he was kind of a crazy dog. He hated German shepherds and other like very specific like Burmese mountain dogs. He just hated them for some reason. And I was so worried when I was on crutches because I had to go without a leash with him. And I just told him, "You got to stay close to me because I can't do this any other way." And he did. He listened. And sometimes a German Shepherd would pop out from around the corner and he wouldn't go crazy at them. And it was also an interesting thing because when I first got sober, uh, I had a sponsor in the very, very beginning, and he said, he met Louis, and he said, "Whoa, that is one big dog. It must be difficult to pick up his poop." And I just said, "Well, I don't really do that." And so for the first like 7 years, I never picked up it. And he was an English Mastiff pit bull mix, huge poops. And I would just lie. People would step in him, they get mad at me. And I was just like, F you. Do you know what I mean? Like, who cares? And people would get so mad. And I remember being on crutches, and my first sponsor, he told me, "You got to pick up this poop." And I was like, "But I'm on crutches." And he's like, "Okay, well, you're gonna do it." And I did. And that was the beginning of me like taking responsibility for myself and for my dog and my neighborhood. And I've decided that, and I got really good at picking up poop on crutches, and people would see it and they were like, "Whoa, this guy is going above and beyond," but I was actually just still picking up poop for the first time ever in my life.
I
Um,
remember hearing at a meeting somebody say, "We're sober, we return our carts at the grocery store." And
yeah,
I couldn't ever not return my cart after that because I was like, "Oh, you have to do that?" Like, "Oh, is
yeah,
that what that whole cart return area is for?" Like, I thought we could kind of just leave them. No, I wasn't like a monster. I didn't leave them like in the
of,
middle of a parking space, but like if you
yeah,
move it over, like it's not in anyone's way. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, "Oh shit. I got to turn
yeah.
all my carts back in."
Yeah. You know, there were so many I was so selfish in so many different ways when I got sober. And when I was on crutches, my sponsor, one of my neighbors, I was living in an apartment in Hollywood off of Melrose and Highland, and maybe 3 weeks in, she said to me, "I hate to do this, I say this to you, but in the middle of the night, when you get up to go to the bathroom and you're hopping to the bathroom on one leg, well, that shakes my wall and it wakes me up." And she said, "Would you mind using your crutches?" And I called my sponsor because that's what I did back then. I didn't have anybody else really to talk to. And I called him, and I was so angry, this big, like all this, I'm so mad. And he said, "Well, how about you just try to do that? Why don't you just like think about what she's going through? She's waking up in the middle of the night. So why don't you just do it?" And I did. And there were all these things that I just tried to do because I was listening to this person not because I just like was too tired. Everything that I tried to do and it led me to this place where I was in an apartment in Hollywood with no food for myself, nothing but drugs and alcohol and dog food. Um, and I tried to call as many people I knew at the time to help me because I just needed somebody with broken ankle, broken leg. I needed somebody to help me to get food and medicine that day to go to the store for me. And I called so New Year's morning. Nobody picked up the phone. The only person who did was this guy that I did all drugs and alcohol drank with. And I said, "Hey, if you come to my house, get me 10 bacon, egg, and cheese sandwiches, pick up my medicine from CVS, I'll give you all the drugs and alcohol at my apartment." And he's like, "I'll be there in 5 minutes." Right. And he was there. And then he was true to his word. He did it. He picked up everything. And then he took out a bag, like a trash bag, he like, rang it out. And he's like, "Okay." And he went on a drug hunt, and during the time that he went to go to get the medicine and the bagels, I thought he's gonna try to look for it. So I tried to hide things. And he was on a ladder. He's like, "Wow, you did a good job trying to hide all this stuff." And I remember looking at him as he left my place, and he had everything. And I was so angry at him. But it was the first miracle that took place in my life. And it's so interesting the way that things happen in sobriety. I had a broken ankle, broken leg. And so 3 months later to the day when I had 3 months sober, I was at the doctor getting the cast off and I was going to something else. And he called me when I'm in the waiting room at the doctor just to see, like, how's it going, checking in on me. And then I told him, oh my gosh, I'm 3 years sober. You helped me. And I think that that freaked him out because I didn't hear from him really again. But it's funny how things happen by coincidence. Like on the day he was there that first day, and
Mhm.
then the next pivotal day was like 3 months sober, and I'm getting my cast off, and this guy calls, right? Um, and that's the thing that I've noticed in sobriety, right? Is that there are coincidences that happen, and that I'm finally alert enough and spiritual enough to receive them.
So when you broke your leg and your ankle, you said, was that a car accident or was that like, how
Oh
did that
gosh,
happen?
I wish that it had been something cool like a motorcycle accident because when I was like at the hospital, everybody asked me, "Oh, motorcycle accident, motor." And no, I was riding an electric scooter on Santa Monica Boulevard, and I was driving. It was I had been doing comedy at the Comedy Store, so I moved out here, um, and I was doing improv comedy at UCB, and I was doing stand up, and I was at the Comedy Store, and there was this, and I was working at Universal Studios Hollywood as on the two jobs at the. I worked at the Kung Fu Panda Adventure Ride, which is like I don't know if it still is there, but and then also I had just been promoted. I got in the gig as a wand master at the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, where I was, which again, jobs that I hated at the time because they were terrible jobs. Um, and I had to clock in my Wand Master uniform at Universal on January 1st at 7:30 a.m., right? Which meant that I had to be there at Universal at like 6:30, change into my uniform. And I was excited about this because it was like a double pay day, right? Like you get, because you get twice the pay, double the pay. But I was doing this show the night earlier at the Comedy Store, and it was around a 7:30, 8 o'clock show. So I thought to myself, okay, this is my plan. I'm going to do the show, then I'm going to leave. I'm going to come home. I'm going to like walk Louis, be with him when the fireworks go off because he hates fireworks. And I'm going to go to bed early, and I'm going to wake up, and I'm going to be there early and clock in. But what happened was I did the show. I was great. Somebody was like, "You were great." And then I said, "Yeah, I was great." And then they said, it's New Year's where you should have a glass of champagne. So I had a glass of champagne. And next thing I knew, I'm like, had basically 3 bottles of champagne to myself. I'm in a room like by the bar all by myself. Everybody is in the main room, and they're all counting down, and I'm just rolling up joints by myself, listening to the countdown, waiting for somebody to come in to say like how great they thought my set was. I ended up leaving at 2:30 in the morning, and I tried to get an Uber, and it was, like crazy amount of money. And I said it out loud. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna save some money and I'm gonna ride an electric scooter. So I rode it drunk and high, crashed the scooter, broken ankle, broken leg. I had already had like a DUI that I was doing nothing about. So this would have been a second one because you can get a DUI riding an electric scooter. You can get one riding a horse, and the horse doesn't even have to be drunk, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and and so I hopped across the street, and I called a bunch of Ubers to get me. Nobody would get me. And then I eventually rode in an ambulance to the emergency room on New Year's Eve
So you
slash
called
morning.
911 for yourself?
I called 911 for myself. And this was after I was almost mugged by someone on the street. I was on Santa Monica Boulevard, and I remember this. I was outside of a car wash and a gas station, and there's this like Mexican Indian food restaurant, and I'm on the street, and I just asked this person, "Would you help me like to get up so I can get?" And then this guy, he was with a woman, and they tried to rob me. And I looked at this woman and I said, please, it's New Year's. And she said, he's right, it is New Year's. And then she just sort of like pushed him along and then they didn't end up robbing me. But that's what it was. That's all that saved me. It was terrible. And I went to the emergency room that night, and the emergency room on New Year's Eve slash morning is a nightmare because it's full of people who are dressed very well, but they have like blood pouring out of their head, or like, people were fighting each other in the emergency room. And every doctor who's there is just like, drew the short straw, or they were like, they had Thanksgiving, right? And or Christmas. And so they want everybody there to die. And they hate everyone who's there. And it's packed with people. It's the worst place to be. But everybody did look great. Everybody but me. And I was so drunk and high at the time that I knew that my ankle was broken, but I didn't know that my leg was also broken. I found that out like about a week later when I said, my leg is really itchy. And then the doctor actually took an x ray and he said, yeah, your leg is also broken. Um, and
So
yeah, I
when
had
you
to have,
called your
yeah.
mom, did
Mhm.
she know that this was a drunk incident? Or did you just say, like, I had an unfortunate scooter accident and try to hide the fact that
I
drinking?
did. But she knew, I tried to hide everything. That was the type of person that I was just someone who was always in fear. I still am like in fear a lot, but someone who told lies to everybody. The first thing that I ever did, I mean, um pathologic was I just told lies about everything to everybody just because I wanted to fit in. I never felt like I fit in, and if I just told the right lies, then people would like me. I was never truly myself. And so yeah, I told my mom and dad that I just fell off of a scooter, or maybe I just said that I slipped on a curb or something and I broke my ankle. And that story didn't check out. It didn't resonate with them. And my mom, when she came to stay with me, my dad took me to my first AA meeting ever, which was on, I think that it was like the 6th, I know the day, I think, right? It was the 6th of January, 2019. And, he didn't have to do that. He brought me,
Where your parents weren't together, I'm assuming.
they're together. They're together. They're
Oh,
still
because you said
together. But
your mom said your dad was gonna fly out to help you. Oh,
yeah,
so they don't
so
live here.
they don't live here. They both of them live in Washington, D.C.,
Okay.
which is where I grew up. And they split it. So my dad took the first shift and then he left. And then when he left, I had surgery. He left the next day. My mom came. And then my mom started taking me to AA meetings. So my dad took me to my first meeting. Then my mom took me to meetings. And there was this place called Bliss Cafe, which was in Hollywood. And she took me there. And one of the things was something that she said to me that stuck with me that I'll always remember was that she said, you have a serious problem. And she said, the reason why, she said, I would love to go on vacations with your dad, but we don't do that anymore because we're worried that we're going to get a call in the middle of the night that you're dead, you know? And I called her all the time from hospitals, from jails. And it was a thing that it was a thing that I did where it's one of the reasons why I became a big part of H&I. I love to do H&I, to go to hospitals and institutions to talk to people about AA. But people still remember, there are people who I'll bump into still where they remember me from the Bliss Cafe. They remember my mom because my mom is from Queens, Bayside, Queens. And so she has the laugh like Fran Drescher from The Nanny. And so people will, they'll say, look at you, you don't have a cast on anymore. Good. That's good. How's your mom? Right. Because they remember my mom took me there. And then there was this moment when everybody left and I was on crutches and I was probably like 10 days sober or 14 days sober. And it was a Wednesday in January. And I went to this meeting, the Hollywood Young People meeting on Las Palmas, like in between Franklin and Hollywood Boulevard. And it was raining and it was at night. And I was on crutches by myself and Uber dropped me off. And I looked up, like the rain coming down. I just like looked up and I didn't know what I was doing at the moment, but I was praying, like give me a reason to stay at this meeting. And I could hear the call of Hollywood Boulevard. and a car parked, and this like really beautiful young woman walked out of the car, and I was like, okay, I'll stay at this meeting. You got me to this one. And that she ended up really saving my life. I sat in the back, and she brought in this speaker who was really funny. And he said, when he first got sober, he sat in the back, and then somebody told him to move forward. Then he moved forward. And then eventually 2 weeks after that, I was sitting in the front, and I asked her for a commitment. She said, well, you're here with a court card. So why don't you sign court cards? And that's what I did. And I took commitments at meetings, which is a thing, again, having a commitment, taking responsibility for myself and my sobriety. That was something that I didn't do. I didn't take anything. I had no responsibility for anything at the time. And that was the beginning of it for me.
I had, when I got sober, I had 3 kids. My
Yeah.
oldest daughter was 4. My twins were
Wow.
18 months old. But I swear to you, I still had that same mentality of just like, take a commitment. I was like, I don't think you understand like how busy I am, And
Yes.
my sponsor
Yes.
was like, well, that doesn't really matter. It's not my problem. Like, this is what we
Yeah.
do. And I was like, ugh. And I had to take the coffee cleanup commitment. And I
Yeah.
was like so aggravated about it every single week because I'm like, I got to do
Yeah.
this fucking coffee cleanup and I barely want to be here in the first place. And then every week I'd be like, I'm not going to go to the meeting. And then I'd go like, oh my God, but I have to do the coffee cleanup. People are going to be my worse than doing the coffee cleanup was the fear of disappointing people and
Yes.
having them go, oh, Stephanie just doesn't show up for things. So I was like,
Yes.
okay, I'll go, but then I'm going to find somebody to cover. I'm going to let every week I'd be like, I'm going to let them know that I'm just way too busy to be doing this coffee cleanup. Plus, it's really boring. And I don't know how it's helping me because I'm not
Yeah.
meeting people. I'm in the back in the
Yeah.
kitchen cleaning the
Totally.
coffee urn. But I swear to you, that kept me sober because I had to keep coming to the meeting. It tricked me.
Yeah, it tricks you. And then there's other things too that end up tricking you. Like my friend who I sat next to, I did the court card commitment, which you have to stay after to do it. And he cleaned up coffee, Jason, a good friend of mine still. And uh, I remember nobody ever had a court card. But then eventually people started needing court cards to sign. And I loved signing. And I was like, I'm here on a court card too. And they were like, okay, but it made me happy just to feel connected to people, because I think that I was so disconnected from everything at the time and everybody, and I remember that it brought me joy just to be there and to hear other people be really really funny, to hear people laugh. And this woman, Mia, she brought in just huge crowds of people for these meetings. So there would be hundreds of people in attendance. And she brought these amazing speakers because she got sober. Her story was super gnarly, and I thought that, that my story was just didn't compare. But it was funny to hear other people when I would tell my story. They were like, "Oh no, your story is really crazy." Yeah, because and it really is like what gets you there. But that's what it was. It was commitments. And then I eventually became the secretary of that meeting, the Hollywood Young People meeting. And it was at the beginning the next year. So it was 2020. And all of the people who came to this meeting because Mia brought them, none of them came back. So it was like a brand new meeting. There were 5 people there, and but then 3 months later, COVID happened. And this meeting ended up being discovered by people all over the world. So it turned out that eventually there would be thousands of people from all over the world at this meeting. And there was a whole group of people who ended up getting sober for the very first time on Zoom. They needed like the pandemic to get sober, right? Then they created their own, WhatsApp groups. And this group that I created, like with this guy, Christian Dopamine Beans. I just checked it out right before we did this. And it started as just like me, this guy Christian, and this other guy from Tennessee. and now it has like thousands of people in it. I don't
Wow.
really participate in it as much as I used to, but it's still like every day people are posting. And I remember there was this woman Kai, and she said like, I remember she's like, how do I get 5 days sober? And I was like, oh, I know how to do that. And we talked on the phone, and now she's like, I went to go speak at a meeting that where now she's the secretary, Hollywood Young People, which is now back in person at the lodge. What is that like?
The log cabin?
In the log cabin. Yeah, like
Uh-huh.
this historic old place. And she was the secretary, and she brought me, and she's like, I'm 3 years sober. And I was like, do you remember when you asked me like, how do I get 5 days sober? And she's like, I think about it all the time. And yeah, it was just that was the a real turning point as well. And then like helping all these people, and then like your commitment runs out, and then you stop, and you had all of this, you were helping all these people, and then you're back just a regular person. You're not the secretary of this meeting, somebody else is. And being the whole doing all of this stuff in sobriety, it really is it's really transformational, like being of service to people, which I think I had never been of service really to anybody. um Certainly not by not picking up my dog's huge poops, right? um but
Let me
uh
ask you this though.
yeah,
So you were a comedian,
yeah,
you were doing comedy, you get
yeah,
sober. Did you go back to doing stand up? Like, and what was it
yeah.
like? And did you have that feeling of, oh my gosh, a big part of, because I love talking to comedians about this kind of thing. I
Hmm.
just had Rich Scheidner on the
Oh,
show. It hasn't aired yet at the
mhm.
time that we're talking, but I'm always so curious because I did not think that I was going to be able to be funny. Um,
Yes.
even as a writer, I was like, how am I
Yeah,
gonna, like, a big part of my identity as a drinker was like, this makes me edgy and I'm cool and I'm
totally.
creative. And I had
Yeah,
such low self-esteem, I think, even though when I got sober, I was 42, I had had multiple book deals. But there was
yes,
some sense of imposter syndrome for me that was like, I don't know if a lot of this is just tied though to like after I have some wine, I feel like some really edgy, cool author. And what's
yeah,
that going to be like just me and the computer or me and
totally.
an audience? Like, am I even going to be able to do that?
Yeah. I think that it's really scary. Like that, I just assumed that I would never be funny again, or that I wouldn't be, that I would lose my connection to everything. But I think that I had this show that was booked right when I got this guy asked me to do it, and I did it. And then my sponsor, I took the commit. My sponsor said, "You're just going to do the show." And I did it, and I didn't feel funny, but I was on crutches, and I just started again, like sort of discovering the thing that I thought was funny about myself. I used to have like all these big premises or all these weird far out things. It was more of like a Zach Galifianakis type vibe to it, like him like at the Purple Onion, where he's drinking and like really far out things like that. But then it was just more real, and I found the part of me that I think is authentic. And the first show that I did, uh, somebody for the first time, this person who was sort of like running the shows at this place at UCB, that they said, "Wow, like that was the first time that I've ever seen you be funny. In fact, and like I thought that you were kind of annoying, and I didn't really like it. Like because I would always try to find like what's the perfect cocktail of drugs, right? Like if I'm going to do a show later that day, I need to like start the day, and the whole day is focused around like that moment in time. And what cocktail will I have to be on? And I knew the exact amount, like exactly what it had to be. And I would always try to hit it at that moment. But this time it was really scary, and I just started talking about what happened to me that day, and what my life is, right? Like that I said, I work at the Kung Fu Panda adventure ride at Universal Studios Hollywood. And that is a thing that people laugh at because it's a funny job. And I was like, the thing about it is that like, I just really like it, right? Which is another thing too, because because people would imagine that you're going to hate that job. And I did this bit at the time, which was that like I stopped drinking, but now I'm addicted to smiling and waving, right? Which is a thing that like, and at first you just start like smiling and waving at people, and then you start, and then eventually like connect with a kid, and then they smile back at you, and then you're like doing it, and then you at the end you're like Scarface, you're like say hello to my little friend, right? So that was like my bit right in the beginning, and it was just true and authentic, and I would truly get high on smiling and waving at people. And it was a job that I hated, but my sponsor was like, "This job sucks, and it's the reason that you're going to stay sober, right? It's the worst job in the world."
So they didn't fire
Um,
you, or you didn't show up.
no, 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 they didn't. I ended up getting like 3 months leave, and then I came, or a couple of months leave, and I came back. And again, like I didn't want to do it, and I kept like calling out, but my sponsor said like, you got to do this, you have to do this, and I just decided to listen to him. And he said too that like, that if you decide, if you trust this, that miracles will start to happen in your life, and that things will happen. And he asked me to write down 5 things that I wanted, like 5 sort of like dream things. And he's like, you'll be able to get some of these things, that they'll happen. And it's been amazing to see like the things that do happen. I remember like I wrote down like, I want to get back together with my ex-girlfriend, right? And he's like, well, we'll see about that. But the thing that I wanted was that I wanted a family, right? Like I wanted a partner and a wife and a family. And I met my wife, my current wife, when I got 1 year sober to the day at the Bliss Cafe. Um, which is the place where I went like all the time. And she's 12 years sober now. I'm 7 years sober, and her sponsee was speaking there, and I just happened to go there. I took a cake, and my sponsor at the time, uh, she had a ticket. Amanda, she had a ticket for a convention, for an AA convention where Russell Brand was speaking, and a bunch of my friends were like helping, to run the convention. So she said, "Do you want to come with me?" And I thought that she was asking me out on a date, but she just had an extra ticket to a convention that nobody wanted to go to, basically. So we both went together, and I kept saying, like, "Do you want to go to a meeting together?" And she's like, "Are you asking me out on a date?" And so I said, she said, because I want to date with intention. And
Oh,
so yeah, which was and I remember like I was working at Second City on Hollywood Boulevard at the time, and I was like, oh gosh, like I was with all these other women. I was like, oh, I don't know, like this is really like, she seems like really assertive, and these women who I was working with, they were like, I like her, And then I said, yeah, I want to ask you out, and we went on a date, and it was bad because that was like my first ever sober date. And she's like, I guess you seem fine. You seem like whatever, but I don't know. This isn't gonna work out, right? Like, and I was like, okay, fine. But my first sober, and again, a thing that I would have done like when I was not sober was I would have like tried to control the situation, right? Like, what do I have to do? No, she doesn't understand. I'm gonna send her a bunch of texts, and like we'll go on another date, and I'll be able to get another one. But my sponsor was like, no, just let it go. You blew it. It's over. Um, and I kept going to meetings, and I didn't text her, I didn't call her. And, like I was right around a year sober, and people started asking me to speak at different meetings. And I was asked to speak at this meeting on Santa Monica Boulevard. And I just like went there once, and then they asked me to speak the next week. And then Tom Hanks got COVID, and all these meetings were shutting down everywhere. And I asked my sponsor, should I go to speak at this meeting? And he said, yeah, you should go, because I don't know what the world is going to be like tomorrow. So go and talk to people. And the meeting where I first went there were probably like 50, 60 people. But after Tom Hanks got COVID, there were probably like 6, 7 people there. And this guy picked me up, he drove me, and I'm sitting down to speak. And then in walks this girl that I went to college with. I was like, what the heck? Talia, right? And she's like, Josh. It was like really weird. And then in walked Amanda. And it wasn't a meeting that she had ever been to before. She went with her friend, my college friend, Thalia, who I hadn't seen since college. And she walked in, and she was sitting in the back. And I spoke, and the meeting ended. And this guy, we went to Whole Foods afterwards, and it was like everybody was running and ransacking supermarkets. So this Whole Foods was just like desolate. Everything, it was like the movie Contagion, right? And then he drops me off back at home at my apartment. He's like, after we saw this scene at Whole Foods, he's like, I don't know that the world is going to be the same. And he's like, and I don't know that I'm ever going to see you again. And I have not seen that guy again, right? Ever.
Whoa.
But I picked up the phone and I had all these missed calls from Amanda. And I called her and I started talking to her on the phone. We talked for like 2, 3 hours that night. And I was finally like normal. The normal person that I couldn't be on the date, I needed like the world to be ending in order to be normal talking to a girl. And we've been together ever since.
And you have 2 kids.
We have 2 little kids and a new dog and a new English Mastiff named Gus. Yeah, we have 2 little boys, a 3.5-year-old and an almost 1-year-old. And yeah, we're your neighbor, and we have
Your life
a
has changed so much. I feel like when I first met you and we talked about, we had all these things in common. We had our dogs and sobriety and comedy and
Mhm,
so crazy. But I think for some reason I thought you were like, I don't know how you could have been 20 years sober because you're young. But,
mhm.
and now you're running for Congress,
Yeah.
which
And
is
now
so
I'm running for
crazy. Your life is 100% different.
Yeah, it really is. It's like so different. When we moved here, it's so funny. I remember Xander, your son, won, like, we had a block party and he won the pie eating contest. And that was sort of like the beginning of my political career in an odd way, right? Like it was like was hosting a pie eating contest that Xander won. It was grotesque because they were from Costco, like these enormous pies that
They were too big. That was
they
unfair.
were too big. And we have not done that since because it was too gross. People were like, you know what, this is actually too much. I don't want to watch this. And now the pies are smaller. We still have the pie eating contest, but now the pies are smaller. But I think that it
And
was
the
the beginning. I
following
did.
year, he won the watermelon eating contest. Let's not just skate over that.
That's true. Yeah, he wins eating contests in the summer and in the fall, right? No
I'm so
matter what the
proud.
season is. Yeah, of course, he's winning the contests everywhere. Um, but I think that it was the beginning, right? Like we bought this house here in Encino, and Encino has this thing called neighborhood council. Well, they have them everywhere. All neighborhood councils. There's 99 of them, and I ran for the neighborhood council, and I got elected with more votes than anybody in the history of the Encino Neighborhood Council, which was 104 votes, right? But then 2 years later, I ran for reelection, and over 3,000 people engaged, like voted in that election, right?
Oh,
And so that was the big, and it was more people voted in the Encino Neighborhood Council election than in any other neighborhood council election across any of the other 99 neighborhood councils in all of Los Angeles. And it's because I think that what people want, oh geez, what people want is like, oh sorry, is connection and community, right? Like, um it's been the my idea about what is ailing us now, like whether it's the threat of like an authoritarian president that we have, uh who, like, authoritarianism thrives in isolation, separation, and fear. And what brings people together, right, joy, connection, and community, I think is the single biggest antidote to authoritarianism. And I also think that it is the thing that we were missing so much during the pandemic. And what I wanted to do was to create moments of joy, right? Like just like in sobriety, right? Like to create community, connection, and joy. And so I started with just our block, right? Like I wanted our block to bring joy to it, and um, and so I did like a costume contest, but I also wanted it to be political. So I wanted our city council member to be in attendance to judge the costume contest. And the reason why I wanted her to be there, Nithya Rama is our city council member, is because I wanted, when these city council members are making decisions about what's happening in the city, I wanted her to know, to have been standing on our block, to have met our neighbors. And if we had some sort of issue, she would be able to help. And that's what has happened, because she judges our costume contest. I have her number. We are able to communicate with one another, and things get done. Which is, I think, like a sad state of affairs for what happens for the city of Los Angeles, that you truly have to, when all of our streetlights were out, for example, right? Like there were no streetlights anywhere. And it took me having to speak with our mayor in order to get them turned back on. That for 8 months, nobody did anything. And the reason is because there's hundreds of thousands of streetlights that are out, and the city is incapable of dealing with it. And so you have to know the mayor and speak to her and ask her in person in order to get your streetlights fixed, expedited. Um, and that's a huge problem. So I ran for the neighborhood council. I won. I became the president of the neighborhood council a year later. I've served as both president and vice president. And my two moments were during the fires, um, when I was the president of the neighborhood council when there were the Palisade fires, and we all received these evacuation orders. But first, there were these false alarms. I don't know if you remember those, but I was standing
I
in a
do.
Gelson's. Yeah, they were crazy. I was in a Gelson's.
Our freaking Chili's almost burnt down. It was
Yeah,
right on the border. My kids were freaking out. That's like a icon, that Chili's.
yeah,
Chili's
yeah,
Encino. It's one of the few that are left. And it was
yeah.
right next to the line. It just about got evacuated. And
Yes,
we're
that's
only a
right.
few blocks from there.
I know. We're only, yeah,
I mean, I
exactly.
we evacuated. You did too, right? We left. We
We
went to
did,
Santa Clarita
no,
to my
we,
brother's.
yeah, no, that was probably a good choice. We didn't evacuate. It was, Amanda was 6 months pregnant. We didn't know, like, we had Gus, we had Nathan, and we didn't know, we didn't evacuate. But uh, but the mayor and our city council member, they both reached out to me because nobody was evacuating, right? Like they sent these evacuation orders up, but nobody was evacuating because of the false alarms. And so they asked, what can I do to help? So I sent an email out to um, all of our Encino Neighborhood Council email subscribers, and I said evacuate now, and I put my phone number, and people started calling. I received probably hundreds of phone calls, right? Like,
Wow.
uh, and and I was just telling people evacuate. We opened up. We almost had a woman who's 96 years old and on like oxygen with a medical aid staying at our house that night. But luckily, I was able to get in touch with her granddaughter who lives in Valencia, and so she was able to help her. But what I realized in that moment, right, is that like I think it's the thing that I've always done, which is that we're sort of on our own a lot of the time, right? Like are the people who we elect to office, like our congressman, he lives in Washington, D.C., right? That's where his house is. He doesn't live in the district anymore. He lives in Washington, D.C. So, I mean, our mayor was in Ghana at the time, right? Like our city council member was here and I think was effective during the fires. Police forces, they were overrun. The fire department was overrun. They were not able to like really do anything to, like, they were focused on holding the line. And so the people who were here, right, like people were scared and they didn't know what to do and they were all evacuated, like, and it was a really scary time. And in that moment, you know I just happened to be the person who was talking to all these people, the president of the Encino neighborhood council, right? And what I realized is that I really liked doing it. I like being of service to people. And the next day was the moment that really got me, was you know, people evacuated and the threat had sort of passed, but the National Guard was on Ventura Boulevard, preventing people from getting back into their houses or preventing burglars from burglarizing those areas. And there was this woman who, I was driving Nathan to Whole Foods, and there was this woman, she called and she said, it's a really silly reason, but I need to get back into my house because my husband died 6 months ago. And there's a sweater that he has that smells exactly like him. And I want to get it before it smells of smoke and of the chemicals that they're dropping on houses. And so I reached out to the mayor and to our city council member, and she was able to get an escort to her house. She picked up the sweater, and she got back into her car and she called me, and I was in the car with Nathan, and she was crying and she said, I have it and it still smells just like him. And she was like, thank you. And then I looked back at Nathan, and could hear the woman was crying. And in like a 2-year-old speak, he asked, like, why is that lady crying? And I said, your daddy helps people. And then he said, Dada helps Nathan with trains, right? And I was like, yeah, that's right. He does. He's like, and planes. But it was the first time that I had ever said that, and that's what I feel like. I feel that we need somebody who truly wants to help people and who lives here and who knows what's happening
Yeah.
and is pragmatic about it.
So you're
And that's
running
what's
for
missing.
Congress, and when does it happen? When will you know?
Yeah, so the election, there's a primary election, which is on June 2nd,
Mhm.
and the top two candidates advance. There's probably like 8 people who are there, but
I
of the
feel good about
candidate,
this for you.
I feel good too. I feel really, really good about
Your
it.
signs are
And
everywhere.
exactly, my signs are
I
everywhere,
want to
and
bring you back to this really quick story though that
yeah. Oh yeah.
before we go, that it's just funny because you were saying how this ties in like with sobriety, that you
Hmm.
weren't sure because I said, "Do you want to do this podcast? Do you think it would hurt your like political aspirations?" And you said,
Yeah.
"No, I think it will help." Like you love being
Yeah.
honest. And then you told me that you went to this function and you've
Yeah.
been in your head about like, do I have to tell people I'm sober? Is that do I
Yeah.
not?
Yeah. 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 No, last night I was at like a fundraiser at a fancy person's house, a fundraiser for me. And I always show up and I'm like, okay, you don't have to first thing you don't have to talk about sobriety is the first thing that you say. And I'm like, I'll just talk about other things. And I'm standing there with the host and he's just talking to me and somebody comes up and he says to me, oh, he was very excited because he knows that I'm sober. And he says, we have some non-alcoholic wine. And I was like, okay, great, cool. And then somebody else comes up just a moment later and he says, oh, yeah, by the way, we have some non-alcoholic wine. And the first thing that comes out of my mouth is, oh, are you sober? I'm sober. And he said, no, I'm not sober. But sometimes I don't, I drink non-alcoholic beer and non-alcoholic wine. And I was like, oh, shoot. Okay, well, that'll be the one time that I tell some that I'm sober. And then later on, when I'm talking to everybody, this group of people, I'm like, by the way, everybody, I'm sober. And I was just like, it is a thing. And it's a thing that comes up because, you know, and it's silly, right? But, you know, the reason why it comes up a lot is because of in Los Angeles and across the world, across the United States, we have a serious mental health problem with drug addiction and alcohol abuse and homelessness. And they're all connected. And they're connected because there are so many people who are sleeping outside, more 70,000 people, right? The people who are sleeping outside, if they're not addicted to drugs, they have a mental health issue, right? And that's the reason why they're outside because nobody would want to voluntarily live outside, right? And the problem is that in Los Angeles, we elect Democrats, right, to run our places because they align with our views. And Democrats have, our elected officials have failed us because there are more people living outside than ever before. Our mental health crisis is larger than it's ever been, worse than it's ever been. And it's because nobody is coming at it from a truly pragmatic, thoughtful way. They're not thinking about it in a way that where there's a real solution. And so,
But
as somebody,
Republicans are not going to do that.
no, and that's the
Republicans are going to say, here's the thing, you're not going to sleep on the street anymore. Get out or we're
get
like, so I
total.
don't know how that's going to fix it either.
Well, no, exactly. And then Republicans, even worse, Republicans are going to point to California, all these people living outside, as an example of what happens when Democrats run large states and cities. So we
Right.
have to get this right, right?
Yeah.
And when our Democrats, like when they come up with these ideas, or it's just either through incompetence or mismanagement or just, you know, good intentions but bad execution, what ends up happening is that good people who are truly empathetic, they reach a breaking point and they say, you know what, just do whatever it takes to remove these people because I can't take this anymore. And that's terrible also. It's There is a solution to this, right? And the solution, it's straightforward, right? Like we need to I've sponsored people who are on Skid Row, right? Like when I won this election, there was this homeless person who lived by the park and he lived there for 5 years. And before he lived in the park, right by the park, he lived under a bridge with his mother for 5 years. And then his mother was able to go inside. For 1 year, I was trying to help this person, right? Like find a place to be inside. And it's a really sad story because he ended up just like being shooed away by after he came to me asking for help, and then when the help did arrive he refused to take it. And so what we have to do is in those moments when people are ready to go, we have to have a place for them to be. And that was the problem, right? There are places, if we have a huge homeless encampment right by where we live, or there used to be one, but the mayor and all these people, they move them from one place, and where they go, they just go to another place. We have to have a place, a facility where people are going to go. We have to move them inside, and there have to be doctors, nurses, social workers there. There has to be AA that people are obligated to go to every single day. Maybe they can have Sunday off or something. And the promise that can be made um, is that if all these people go inside, you won't see any homeless people. There will be no crime. There will be no fires. There'll be no trash, right? I have a plan that would reduce homelessness by 30% immediately. And it's because of being sober, right? It's because like I've seen what works and I know what doesn't work. And I want Democrats, because I'm a Democrat, to be able to do big things. And the biggest problem that we face here in California, and it's soon going to be across this nation, is one of mental health crisis and homelessness. And it's become such a horrible situation where now police officers, the only thing that they do is a lot of what they do is they move homeless, they enforce homeless encampments. So
Yeah.
they move homeless people from one corner to another. Nobody wants to work as a police officer. Firefighters, what do? They put out fires that are created by people who are living outside. So firefighters, they go to 5, 6 fires sometimes in a day. Just homeless people created fires. Police officers are dealing with homelessness. And so then when there are burglaries in our neighborhood, police officers, they're becoming less and less equipped to be able to solve burglaries because what they do primarily is deal with homelessness.
Well, listen, do you have a website where you have
I
all of
do.
your
I do.
ideas and solutions that people can
I
go check
do.
out? Yeah, and
I
start
do.
to get involved.
It's Josh Sautter for Congress, all letters.com. Josh Sautter for
I'm going to put that
Congress.com.
in the description of the show. Uh-huh.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and joshsauterforcongress.com. I'm also on Instagram, joshsauterforcongress.com, at Josh Sautter for Congress.
Love
And
it.
and you can
I'm gonna
find me
follow
also
that
like
right now.
at Gelson's in Encino, which is another thing too. Like I think that you could find me driving my kids to school in the morning,
Oh, you're
walking the
just a
dog in the
regular
park.
guy. You walk your dog
Yeah,
like 8 times a day.
totally. Yeah, exactly. And it's because like what I like about it is that, you know, you talk to people and you find out what are the real issues in the neighborhood. And not just in the neighborhood, but everywhere. And I think that in order to be an effective congressman, you have to be accountable to the people that you represent. In order to be held accountable, you have to live in the district.
And you learned how to be accountable from sobriety.
Yeah.
It's all full
From
circle,
being
baby.
Yeah, it all starts with me picking up poop when I was on crutches. Yeah.
I love it. What a great message. Josh, thank you for giving us your story. This was a great episode. I loved it.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm so happy to be able to do it.
And
Really,
I will let
real
everybody
pleasure.
know you already told everyone where to find you, but if you don't know, you can look at the description on the YouTube channel, and you can look at the description on the wherever you get your podcast, the description's there. Oh my God.
Yes.
My mind. All right. Thank you, everybody, and I will see you next week. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Life is good, yeah.